It's hard to believe every time I think about that.
Yeah. We are beginning our presentation, our good news with Barret and Charlie. We were just talking about, it's been over 3 years of silliness and hijinks.
On Saturday mornings in Glendies. Yeah, so it's, I was just saying that every time I think about the fact we've been doing this for over 3 years now, it just amazes me. And we do, we have such fun doing this, so.
We have fun listening.
You have fun listening? It's a joy. It is a joy. So.
Well, I do have some jokes for later too. So
of course,
Charlie will be groaning, and maybe we'll see if anyone
else groans. We always like to kick it off with the prayer that's on page 28, and so we'll start with that. You can do much on behalf of your own healing and that of others if, in a situation calling for help, you think of it this way: I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal.
Wow. Do you want to start off with?
Sure. Yeah. So we always like to just mention the fact that we are Wapnickian in nature. Ken Wapnick was the preeminent teacher of A Course in Miracles, who passed away in 2014, I think, end of 2014. Prolific writer and teacher of The Course in Miracles. And so this appendix, it was in a number of his books. We have a large copy of it, and we refer to this frequently as we just have our discussions today. So it's the story of the truth. And that's what's so wonderful about it. So we talk about heaven being all there is, God, love, the presence of that, the awareness of that, the knowledge of that, the experience of it is all there truly is. Everything else below this line is just a story that we've told ourselves. And so this is a description of how we wake up to the fact that we've got a story going on. We start to recognize it in our lives here in this world, this illusionary world. And and part of what we're talking about today is the practice. How do you practice the Course in Miracles? What do you do as we put in our flyer? How does this work when the rubber meets the road here in this illusion? How do we do this? So this is the beginning of this concept, to recognize that there's got to be another way. And in this recognition, we start to go inside and ask for help from the other teacher that we have, Holy Spirit, who's inside of all of us, is a part of us. And so that's kind of the full circle here. We start to wake up, we start to question, right, what's going on in our lives and how we think about it, how we see it. And we go to this other teacher, Holy Spirit, to see the right mind and to regain insanity and get out of the insanity. So that's kind of where we always want to mention Ken and the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, which put this together.
So again, our topic is how do we live these principles, right? Most of us have been studying them for a while, and it's still the trick, right? We still go through our life and we have trouble finding the peace when something rocks our boat. And really looking at this chart, the problem always comes back to our belief in the ego. That's it, right? We talk a lot. We've been talking again for years about these concepts, but it really comes back to the fact that we believe the ego is true. And what is the ego? The ego is the idea that we are apart from God. God is love, so we're apart from love. That's what we think. Not true, right? What's still true is what's above this top line, that we're whole, we're one, we're complete. It's always true, but we bought into a false idea. And that one mistaken choice to believe the ego is real is the root of all suffering. It's the root of all pain. It's the root of all agony of any kind, So we're going to kind of look a little bit at what this is, because it's going to help us to see what we don't want. And in a way, it's kind of strange. Why would we spend so much time looking at what we don't want? Because the more clarity we have around that, the more that we realize what we're doing and we step away from it. So it's only seeing what we're doing that we can make a different choice, right? So it's always about a choice. It's always about a choice between the ego and Holy Spirit. What the Course calls the wrong mind and the right mind. Insanity and sanity, right? We come back to these ideas again and again and again. And the Course does say that we are literally insane anytime we are choosing suffering. Anytime we're choosing unhappiness, anytime we're choosing pain. And it doesn't seem right, like we're consciously choosing these things, but we are assured that we are. And we're encouraged to make another choice. And again, that's our work. That's just our work again and again and again. Sometimes it feels like we're batting our head up against a wall. Sometimes it feels like we're struggling with a rhinoceros. But we just do it again and again and again. Good job. You like that one, the rhino? So the ego can feel really hard a lot of the time. But then when we make the choice back into peace, we almost always have this experience of looking back at it and saying, oh, why did I struggle so much with that? It wasn't such a big deal. That wasn't so bad. So I picked for the first thing to share today this idea about the ego a little bit more deeply. This is in chapter 23 on page 488. And Jesus here says, conflict must be between two forces, right? So even this very first sentence, he's getting us into the idea that all of this is about duality, right? We contrast the oneness of heaven with the duality of the ego thought system. And this seems to be the normal experience in the world, right? There's you and there's me. And we look at very basic like sentence construction, right? We have a subject, we have an object. There's something acting and something acted upon. Right? These are basic kind of Newtonian physical laws even. They seem so just natural. But what we're learning is that's not natural. These ideas are based on a thought system that is insane. And even again, this very idea of subject and object, if you broke a sentence apart, these are key ideas. This is based ultimately on the ego thought system. So he goes on to say, conflict, again, must be between two forces. It cannot exist between one power and nothingness. There is nothing.
I'm sorry, where are you at on page?
This is paragraph 8.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, conflict must be between two forces. This is page 488.
Oh, it's 488.
488.
No wonder
Yeah.
I thought you said, okay.
No worries.
Never mind.
No worries. Yeah, we're in chapter 23 on 488.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it cannot exist between one power and nothingness. There is nothing you could attack that is not part of you. Interesting statement. There's nothing you could attack that is not part of you. In this world, it does look like you can attack something that's not part of you, right? A lot of us enjoy kind of hating on the president and what he's doing, right? And it really looks like when we do that, that's not me, I'm putting it out there. But what we're starting to see more and more is nothing is truly separate. And when we're putting out bile, when we're putting out anger and judgment on any brother, no matter how insane they are, it's coming back to us. That judgment and that anger is coming back because there is no separation. And some part of our mind realizes this and knows this. So this is why we just keep practicing, right? We look at all of our grievances. As the great workbook lesson says, love holds no grievances. This is what we're trying to achieve in our experience here, to become that love that holds no grievances. He goes on a little bit more. He says, and by attacking it, something that we think is not as a part, and by attacking it, you make two illusions of yourself in conflict with each other, right? What's he talking about here? Well, there's a body here and a body here, right? One of the most repeated lines in the Course is, I am not a body. I am free, for I am still as God created me. In that place, there is peace, right? That's a place of formlessness. That's a place of truth. Again, a lot of times these things start off as intellectual concepts, but eventually we come into an experience of them. So again, he's really digging into what this ego thought system is saying. And he's helping us to see, you don't want this, right? Look at what you've been doing, consciously sometimes, unconsciously a lot of the time, but look at what you've been doing. You could say that the Course is a practice of radical self-honesty. Because we just have to be super honest with ourselves. We get more and more honest. Yeah, I was being selfish when I said that. I said these nice words, but they had an edge to them. You know, I wanted my way. You know, all these sorts of things that happen, all these ways that we interact. And we're not doing this then to beat ourselves up for that, but just to be really clear. Just to say, yeah, you know, I have an ego. I've acted like a jerk. You know, I know I have. Charlie will tell you that. But I don't have to be cruel to myself about that. And a part of why I don't have to be cruel is because I remember nothing really happened. Right? This comes back to the idea that this world is a dream. This world is an illusion. And so we don't need to be upset about anything that happened here, because it's like if we woke up from a nightmare that we had in bed at last night, and then we said, oh my God, look at what I did in that nightmare. You know, I beat up that monster, or the monster, you know, there was a fight and I killed it, whatever. I mean, weird things happen in dreams. We wouldn't then feel bad about what we did in a dream, right? And why is that? Because we know it's not true. We know that there was nothing there.
How do you know when you're coming from the ego?
Anytime you are not completely at peace, you are coming from the ego. I mean, it's a pretty high bar, right? And this is kind of the shocking realization that a lot of us have as we're working with this, that, you know, 90-some% of the time, we're actually coming from the ego. And then again, the ego wants to latch onto that and say, oh my God, look at you. You've been studying the course for blah, 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 this long. And you're still acting out of unkindness. You're still choosing, you know, hurt. You're still choosing to feel like you're the victim. Okay, well, yeah, I have been. And I don't want to keep doing that. I want to start a new pattern. So, yeah.
We choose again.
Exactly, we choose again.
So it's kind of interesting. Thanks, Barret. I got up this morning and I was thinking about, you know, this topic where the rubber meets the road, and Barret just touched on it in his opening there when he was saying, you know, what we do here is we keep talking about the same thing. We keep explaining this the same way, and we keep recognizing this over and over and over again. This idea that we've got a choice, you know, starting to catch ourselves, as I said earlier. And the word that came to me this morning as I was thinking about today was practice. You know, and it's really what this is all about for us, the practice, right, of accepting this, you know, concept that there's another way to see things, you know, and we do that over and over and over again. We're constantly being bombarded by the ego saying, choose me, choose me, choose me, you know, listen to this story of guilt, listen to this story of, you know, projection, this fear, this intolerance, this, you know, making sure that somebody else is creating my pain, you know, those types of things, you know. Or, you know, we can also get into the place where we're beating ourselves up too, right? You know, yeah, look how screwed up my life is, and I've done it to myself, sort of thing, you know. So we can do that as well. But I was just, you know, thinking of that idea of practice this morning, and so this concept is, I'm in a section called the Invitation to Healing, but this is really what we want to do here, is start to recognize that in this tiny mad idea, this dream of separation, right, this idea that the Son of God could be separate from this Father is really what kicked this whole thing off. It was a tiny mad idea, a tiny tick of time. We were talking about this on Thursday, you know, this little moment which meant absolutely nothing in eternity, we have taken and created this entire universe and world and lives and all the stories we've got going on. So once we start to recognize that, you know, we have an option, a choice to see it a different way, then we can start to heal the mind. As Barret was pointing out, this insanity, right? Right mind, wrong mind. We can start to heal the way we think. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, really, is healing the way we think. And that's the practice for us, is to catch ourselves buying into the insanity, catch ourselves buying into this story of self-ego, and heal this. And so healing thus becomes a lesson in understanding. And the more you practice it, the better teacher and learner you become. If you have denied truth, right? heaven. What better witnesses to its reality could you have than those who have been healed by it? Be sure to count yourself among them. So I want you to hear this, right? Be sure to count yourself among them, for in your willingness to join them is your healing accomplished. So Jesus is telling us it's as simple as this, just being willing to practice, right? It's that simple for us. Just be willing to practice. Catch ourselves in these moments, right, where the ego is taken over, which is, like Barret was just pointing out, most of the time we're there hanging out with the ego, right? But we are. But we don't have to be guilty about that. We don't have to beat ourselves up about it. We just have to see that we did it. We just have to recognize that's the way I'm thinking. And in that recognition, I can have the willingness to see it differently. And in that willingness is the healing. So it gets down to the basics. The basics of it are so simple, right? We can actually start to recognize, right, that this is true. You know, we can actually start to experience this. Your question earlier was, you know, how do you know, right? And Barrett's response was, whenever you're not at peace. Well, if you think about how your day goes along, at least my day goes along, there's a whole lot of judgment going on during my day. I'm judging about this thing, I'm judging about that thing, I see this on the TV, the driver on the road, my spouse says something, but you know, there's all kinds of judgments going on. It's, you know, as the Course says at one point, you know, you judge and you judge constantly, and you're driving yourself what?
Crazy.
Insane. No? Yeah, driving yourself crazy. And that's what we do with it. Because every single judgment is a story of separation. You know, we are not one, we are two. There's you and there's me, and I'm going to judge you to make me feel better. So I just wanted to just kind of recognize that the healing starts with the willingness. It's just that simple. And we can be in gratitude because of that. So every time I catch myself, having made this choice, I can go to gratitude. I can simply say thank you. I don't have to figure out what to do next, right? My teacher is going to show me that. And there's wonderful expressions of that throughout the Course, you know, letting us know that we don't have to worry about what to say or what to do, right? As we just said with the prayer that we started with. But there's another, I'm sorry.
It's in one of the lessons.
Yeah,
Jim was always saying that.
yes, and that's where I'm going to if I can find it. Yeah, only God's plan for salvation will work. It's lesson 71. Yeah, and so where I was going with that is just this, you know, I don't have to worry about how to fix it, right? I really need to just go to my teacher, Holy Spirit, right? Go inside to my teacher and ask, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? And what would you have me say, and to whom? And that's it. I can catch myself, right? And recognize that I've chosen ego. And then I can ask seriously, I mean, just simply ask Holy Spirit, what should I do? Where should I go? What should I say? You know, and then just listen for the answer. You know, be in that moment, be in that place of peace. Choose that over this crazy story that I'm about to jump into here. I'm sorry, Frank, you had a question, but
You know, it's all about the comfort zone. And having been involved with the insanity of what the world says I need to do or the ego says I need to do, I had become very comfortable with that because it's something I know. It's like
sure,
jumping off the cliff. I don't know what's going to happen if I fall.
Yeah.
So the more I do the Course, the more I become comfortable with the assurance that
yes,
I'm not by myself.
right.
And then,
Well, that's it's interesting because really what you're saying is we get to a place where the chaos that we create, we accept as reality, you know? And it's when we start to recognize we're creating the chaos, you know, ourselves with our mind, that we start to say, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way. And that was the start for Helen and Bill with this, right? There's got to be a better way than doing this, right? And so that's the willingness, that little bit of willingness saying, you know, there's got to be a better way. Help me. Thank you. It gets down to pretty much those basics.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And it's interesting, you know, that again, this chaos, even though it's uncomfortable, we are familiar with it, right?
Yeah.
And your idea of like stepping off a cliff, you're not sure what's going to happen. Well, this image has been showing up for me a lot in my life, and people I've been working with, of that when we really hand it over to spirit, it's almost like we put on a pair of angel wings, and the wings themselves sort of take us forward effortlessly. And we don't need to try so hard. We can just be carried. And there is that sort of energy that starts to happen the more we really start to rely on our inner teacher. Because then I don't need to figure it out. You know, this is why Charlie and I say that prayer at the beginning, because Charlie and I don't know how to share this the best with you guys. But Spirit has it all figured out. And the more that we can just really hand things over to that inner wisdom, then there is a sense of effortlessness that can come into it, and a sense of real beauty and happiness. So, but again, the way we do that is we really look at the times we're choosing fear and judgment, and we start to say, you know, I know that old story. I know I'm still stuck in it, but I want to keep letting it go. And one of the key ideas over here, when we look at this box, is the word sin. And a few months ago, Charlie and I did kind of look at some of these sections in the workbook. There's one called "What is Sin?" And I wanted to share a little bit from that today. He says, "Sin gave the body eyes. For what is there the sinless would behold?" So this sentence here is kind of important, because what it's saying is that, again, our attachment to sin, when we trace this journey, right, we're still up here in the truth of oneness. This is basically kind of like a map of our descent into this experience of the world, right? We can follow it down, and then we follow this arrow down, and we go all the way down here. And once we're down here, this is the experience of being a body in a world of time and space. So what's he saying here? Sin gave the body eyes. So he's saying, as we attached ourselves in the mind to the idea that we were separate from God, we needed to prove the separation was real. We made up a body in order to do that. And the body does seem to prove this, right? I mean, my body's not your body. You know, all these bodies are different. And our senses also were made to prove separation real. When we think of, you know, the five senses we all kind of learned in school and know, they're all about, I'm sensing that. I'm sensing something other, right? Sensing was made to prove otherness, prove separation is true. When we look at it really at its core. And what is this saying? Well, here, just a little further, he says, to sense is not to know. To sense is not to know. Well, knowledge is synonymous. They're at the top of the chart. And to know is to know the oneness of God. So if we're down here and believing that what the body is showing us is true, we're denying that this oneness is real. So to sense is not to know. And truth can be but filled with knowledge and with nothing else. So another way of saying this is, up here in heaven, where we really are, there are no bodies. And this is what's so scary about doing this work, right? Because a part of us is like, I don't want to not be a body. I still want to be this thing. And so we try all kinds of compromise approaches. We try to bring the light down into the world. And so many people have tried this, and maybe it helps for a little bit and feels a little better, but in some way it always then falls apart, and we're left holding the bag.
You mentioned you were going to go to Europe,
Mhm.
and that you had anxiety over that.
Right.
Did you feel yourself as a body in that situation?
Yeah.
And how did you overcome that?
Well, let's walk through the steps, right? So this is all about forgiveness, right?
German lessons.
Yeah, German lessons. Yeah, once I know the language, I'm fine. Well, you know, in the moment of fear, I was thinking I was a body, right? Because fear is always attached to a body. We can't, you know, fear has to have some sort of object to point to. This is under threat. And in that moment, when I was feeling fearful, for whatever reason, I was thinking my body was under threat. Again, I might not have known why, but that's what was happening. So again, the first step, as Charlie said, is to catch ourselves, to realize that we have a choice to make. So that was the first thing I did, is I noticed I was feeling afraid. And then we kind of walk through the steps, right? The steps of forgiveness are, first of all, remembering I'm never upset for the reason I think. Okay, so this is the recalling of the projection. I was projecting the fear within my mind onto the story of visiting Germany. And that seemed to be the cause of my fear. But it wasn't really, right? Because the fear is never about anything in the world. Never, 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 never. It's always about, ultimately, our choice to believe in the separation. Right? We always come back to the same root. So it can be helpful sometimes to kind of look at the story, right? To look at, well, what's going on inside me? Why is this fear coming up? But at some point, we always want to switch to that deeper remembrance. I'm not apart from God. If I'm not apart from love, what is there to fear? And in that place, the fear will melt away. And again, sometimes these issues, they take a lot of practice. There's a lot of layers. A lot of time we need to forgive them again and again and again. But at some point, it will always ultimately switch into peace.
Did you eventually release that anxiety?
Yeah, I was just sharing with these guys before we started how peaceful and joyful I am about going over to Germany. And yeah, it's a really beautiful thing. So that did switch for me. Yeah. Yeah. So we've been serious for long enough, so it's time for me to share. I've got some, actually this is kind of interesting story. This kind of woman. Is it in German? No, it's not. It's not.
Why do you have the Rosetta Stone?
You translate it.
So I'm going to go change the thermostat. It's so funny because as you were speaking about how senses,
Yeah.
that's the thing I was thinking about was temperature.
Yeah,
You could be in the room and somebody's cold and somebody else is warm. Kind of be
So this is a story about a grandmother, it says. A grandmother reported, the other day I went up to a local Christian bookstore and I saw a honk if you love Jesus bumper sticker. And again, this is her story, so I'm going to tell it from her perspective. I was feeling particularly sassy that day because I had just come from a thrilling church choir performance, followed by a thunderous prayer meeting. So I bought the sticker and put it on my bumper. So today I was sitting in my car at a red light at a busy intersection, just lost in thought about the Lord and how good he is. And I didn't notice that the light had changed. Well, it is a good thing someone else loves Jesus, because if he hadn't honked, I'd never have noticed. I found that lots of people love Jesus. While I was sitting there, the guy behind started honking like crazy. And when he leaned out of his window, he screamed, "For the love of God, go, go." What an exuberant cheerleader he was for Jesus. Everyone started honking. I just leaned out of my window and started waving and smiling at all these loving people. I even honked my horn a few times to share in the love. There must have been a man from Florida back there, because I heard him yelling something about a sunny beach. I saw another guy waving in a funny way with only his middle finger stuck up in the air. I asked my teenage grandson in the back seat what that meant. He said it was probably a Hawaiian good luck sign or something. Well, I've never met anyone from Hawaii, so I leaned out the window and I gave him the good luck sign back. My grandson burst out laughing. Why, even he was enjoying this religious experience. A couple of the people were so caught up in the joy of the moment that they got out of their cars and started walking towards me. I bet they wanted to pray or ask what church I attended. But this is when I noticed that the light had changed. So I waved to all my sisters and brothers, grinning, and drove on through the intersection. I noticed I was the only car that got through the intersection before the light changed again. And I felt kind of sad that I had to leave them after all the love we'd shared. So I slowed the car down, leaned out the window, and gave them all the Hawaiian good luck sign one last time as I drove away. Praise the Lord. Such wonderful folks.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Oh, that's good.
With that bit of laughter, right? We're not supposed to take any of this seriously. I'll hand it back over.
Sure, I segued into this one.
Just give them the Hawaiian good luck sign.
Remember that one.
So I was thinking as you were speaking before the story, I was thinking of the word invulnerability. It's come up a lot this week during our course groups. And one of the things that the course teaches is that as a son of God, right, we are invulnerable. So all these stories we tell ourselves, all our stories of attack, all our stories of being attacked, are things that are not true. There is no attack in heaven. There's no vulnerability in heaven, right? So as a son of God, I can't be attacked. But I'm constantly telling myself stories that I can be, that I can be hurt, that I can be separate, that I am separate, And there's a section in the course talks about littleness versus magnitude. And it just kind of hit me this morning because I was thinking about this, this concept of littleness is what we're telling ourselves down here. We don't believe that we are the Son of God, that we are invulnerable, that we are one with our Father. We're down in this mind, this crazy mind over here that says we're not. We're something separate, So Jesus is pointing out to us that we're making a choice for littleness versus magnificence, right? And we constantly are making this choice for ourselves, saying, oh yeah, I'm going to buy into this story. And it's a story of littleness, not the magnitude and the grandeur that the truth is. And so there's a section here, there's a deep responsibility you owe yourself, and one you must learn to remember all the time. The lesson may seem hard at first, but you will learn to love it when you realize that it is true and is but a tribute to your power. But again, I just want to point out the word, the lesson. So, again, it's this practice, getting back to this practice, catching ourselves. This is called A Course in Miracles. And Jesus says right in the beginning, he talks about a curriculum. The curriculum, everybody's got to take the curriculum. It's just a matter of when we choose to do so, right? When we make a choice to do so. So one of the things we want to recognize is that the choice is between this glory, this incredible awareness, this being in touch, this being at peace, versus this little story of this story of littleness, where I've got all this crap going on in my life, right? And that's a choice that I make, right? But we have a responsibility. You owe yourself, right? You owe the Son of God, yourself, the one you must learn to remember all the time. The lesson may seem hard at first, and I think we all struggle with this at first, right? But you will learn to love it when you realize that it is true and it is but a tribute to your power. You who have sought and found littleness, remember this. Every decision you make stems from what you think you are and represents the value that you put upon yourself. If I believe I'm the separated Son of God, that I'm the separated from my Father, then every decision I make is going to affirm that. Believe a little can content you, and by limiting yourself, you will not be satisfied. For your function is not little, and it is only by finding your function and fulfilling it that you can escape from littleness. So this gets us back, for me anyways, gets me back to this concept of practice, right? I recognize, if I can keep that thought in mind that I'm choosing littleness, I'm choosing this insane life over this life of wonder, this life of joy, this life of opportunity and blessings and love, right? I'm making a choice here. As he says, it's going on every moment. So this is the practice for us. Again, getting back to this earlier concept that Barret brought up, this repetitive nature of this for us. I often used to say to people when I was working with people one-on-one and they were first starting to question and getting in the course and that sort of stuff, I said, it's not like you walk into a room and flip a light switch on and all of a sudden there it is, That's not the way this works for us.
Can you tell us where that is?
Yes, that section is, that's in section, chapter 13, Roman numeral 3, on page 307. The section I read is 307. It starts over in 306.
Thank you.
Yeah. But, it's not that. This is a practice for us. He's just telling, if you want to be a 300 hitter in baseball, what do? Right? You go to the batting cages, practice, 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 practice. You do it every day. You don't do it once a month. We do this every day. And I think it's so key for us to recognize that. So we have this opportunity. Jesus is explaining to us, look at the way you make decisions, right? Look at the way things are going in your life. Error is real, scarcity, sin, guilt, fear, battleground, victimization. I love all this down here. We buy into this. We think it's so real. But look at the way we're doing that. Look at the way we think about this life and recognize, no, that's the small choice. That's the little choice. That's the ego way of seeing things. The perspective of the Holy Spirit is completely different. We can take the same thing we're looking at here, the story of separation, take it to Holy Spirit and be shown a story of oneness. We can take a story of scarcity or error or fear, victimization. We can take those stories to Holy Spirit and be shown a story of oneness. And that's the wonderful opportunity we have. And we get to do it over and over and over again because we're so frequently catching ourselves doing this. I am separate from my Father. Look at the proof. I'm separate from my Father. Look at the proof. No, this is not proof of anything except littleness. It's not proof of this. It's not proof of truth. It's proof of a false story that I've got going on, that I've created.
I like the phrase proof of truth. It's like say that five times fast. Proof of truth. Proof of truth. So, as usual, the items that I had picked out fit perfectly with what Charlie's saying.
Yeah.
Because I had next to share from chapter 29 on page 613. The line is, when you are angry, is it not because someone has failed to fill the function you allotted him? So when you are angry, is it not because someone has failed to fill the function you've allotted him? And look at it, that's really what we're doing, right? Again and again, we have these ideas of how people should be, and when they don't make, us, fulfilled in that way, then all of a sudden we are the victim. We're the victim of what they have done or they haven't done, they have said or they haven't said, whatever we feel victimized by, it's in there. And he says, and does not this become the reason your attack is justified? And he puts reason in quotes because it's not really reasonable, right, to do this, but it is what we do. The dreams you think you like are those in which the functions you have given have been filled. The needs which you ascribe to are met. It does not matter if they be fulfilled or merely wanted. It is the idea that they exist from which the fears arise. So just to go back over this again, it doesn't really matter if our expectations, our expectations of what someone else does are filled or not. It is the idea that they exist from which the fears arise. It's the fact that we have the expectations. We're really setting ourselves up for disappointment and for judgment. He says, dreams are not wanted more or less. They are desired or not. Right? So again, when we look at what he's saying here, he's saying that this is a whole thought system. And we can't have just some of it. A lot of the time as we work with this non-dualistic framework, we begin by saying, well, I want to let go of the bad so I can have the good stuff. And that's reasonable, right? We all want to let go of the bad. But what we don't see is that we're maybe still subtly holding on to the whole system. So again, this goes back to really looking within. What are some of the dark corners within our mind? And once we find them, we hand them over to Jesus. We hand them over to Spirit. We say, hey, can you show me how to see this through loving eyes? Because when I look at it, all I see is I'm a bad person. When I look at it, all I see is I've got some sin that I can't fix. We kind of come back to the Lady Macbeth story, out damn spot. After she committed murder, she couldn't wash her hands enough, right? Because she couldn't get rid of the stain of the guilt. Even if her hands were clean, she didn't feel clean within. And we can all relate to this in our own way. We all have our stories of guilt and shame. And it's by bringing them forward, by really handing them over to that light within, that we are cleansed, we are released, we can step back into our truth. So.
So just kind of coming off what Barret was saying, so again, we're talking about this change in the way we think, change in mind, change in teachers, right? From the teaching, the wrong-minded teaching of the ego to the right-minded teaching of the Holy Spirit. And it's a choice we get to make over and over and over again. And there's a section in the Course, chapter 17, number 5, Roman number 5, the healed relationship. And it says in here on page 363, only a radical shift in purpose could induce a complete change of mind about what the whole relationship is for. That's the relationship between me and my brother, right? What the whole relationship is for. As this change develops and is finally accomplished, it grows increasingly beneficent and joyous. So again, we're talking today about where the rubber meets the road. How do you incorporate the Course into your life here, in this, where I'm in this earth suit? I think this is really going on. And what I want to do is recognize that I need a change of mind about what the relationship with my brother is for, right? My brother is not here for me to keep separate and use as my my whipping boy to prove that I'm the victim, right? That's not what he's here for. What he's here for me is to learn how to practice forgiveness, for telling myself a story that he's my whipping boy and is making me guilty, right? I get to make him guilty. I'm sorry. He is not my whipping boy. He is not separate from me. We are one and the same. So I want to change my relationship with my brother. And, one of the tenets of the Course is this practice of forgiveness, which we had a great discussion on this past week, So what do I want to forgive? What is it that I need to practice? How do I practice this forgiveness? I want to catch myself making my brother separate from me, telling myself a story about my brother that reinforces that story of separation, right? I'm down in this area here, as Barret pointed out, the world of bodies down here. And as the Course tells us, the body isn't real. So how do I make the body real? Well, I do it with this guilt projection. He is outside of me. He's something separate from me. And he's going to be not only my whipping boy, but he's also going to be the one that I set up to bring me what I want, right? If you do this, if you do it my way, right? If you take care of things my way, just do it my way, everything will be fine, And we said there's this great line in the Course where we talk about the seek and do not find, right? And this is what we're going to not find. We're never going to find the peace when we set our brother up as the one who's going to deliver it to us in some way. My brother can't deliver peace to me. Peace is something that I already am. Peace is something that I exist in, right? I cannot have a brother that I'm holding separate bring me my peace. The new car isn't going to bring me
What's
peace.
the idea of peace?
Yes.
And recently in the news, there have been a few instances where I'm just wondering what's going on with the women with the Me Too movement. A lot of them are now expressing their frustration over past experiences.
Right.
They're becoming very vocal about what happened in the past. Can you express these ideas from a place of peace? Number two, in the Kavanaugh hearings, he was also expressing his frustration over being falsely accused and almost feeling, whatever. Now, can he express his views also coming from a place of peace? I mean, are these, in order to express the views of peace, do you have to be quiet and almost angel-like, like a choir boy? Or can you express these views of peace and still have some passion about what you're talking about?
Yeah. So I'll go back to something Barret mentioned just a little while ago, and that is, I am not a body, I am free, I am still as God created me. In truth, we are spirit. We are not bodies. So we are not somebody that's before the Senate being having guilt projected on them. We are not the accuser who is projecting the guilt. We are none of those things, in truth. Now, does that mean that in the illusion here, that where I think I'm living, because I'm buying into this insanity, you know, I believe these stories going on, that I don't get to a place where I make choices? Yeah, I can turn the TV on and get upset. But I can also see that I'm getting upset. And that's what I want to catch. It's never about the story.
Can you turn the TV on and not get upset?
No.
That's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal. Exactly. Yeah, I can turn the TV on, not be upset. I can recognize that what I'm watching is simply a manifestation of this. It's simply a manifestation of having chosen this thought system. And this is the Son of God. This is not Charlie. Remember? I think something that Ken Wapnick, right, who put this together, points out to us a lot in his teachings is, this is the you that we're talking about here in the Course. It's not necessarily you, Charlie, when I'm reading it. It's you, the Son of God. You believe this. The Son of God believes this. We are all just pictures. We're just part of this movie that we've created. The Son of God has created to reinforce this separation, you know? And so when I see the mass murderer, or I see the woman talking about, you know, from the Me Too movement, or I see Kavanaugh, or I see Trump, or I see, as you said that day, I love that guy, right? When these things are going on, what I want to catch is what? I want to catch how I'm thinking. Which mind am I thinking with? Am I seeing my brother in separation? Or am I seeing my brother in oneness, right? With the right mind? Well, typically, I'm judging. Typically, I'm finding my brother separate from me. That's what I want to catch. It's never about the story. It's about how I'm thinking about the story. Do I see my brother in separation? If I'm getting upset with what I'm watching on the TV, I'm seeing my brother in separation. So now it's my homework. Now I've got to go back to my practice. And my practice says, I'm not a body, I'm free. This is the movie I'm watching. This is the one I've written, the script I've written, right? And the script I've written, you know, with this co-writer right here is the one going on here. Error is real. All this stuff is real. All this stuff is true. It's proving to me over and over and over again that this ego thought system is true. That's what I want to find myself doing, buying into that. And then the forgiveness comes in. I forgive myself for buying into that story. That's it. I don't have to forgive Kavanaugh. I don't have to forgive Ford. I don't have to forgive Trump. I don't have to forgive anybody. I forgive myself for my thoughts. I forgive myself for buying into that thinking. Yes.
So when I was in grammar school, it was important to be up on current events.
Mhm.
And I took that script all my life.
Yeah.
So I'm aspiring to be where you're at. What I have found is the less I listen to the media, I'm able to get past base camp and maybe up to the next camp. You know? Yeah, I want to be king. I've gone to the mountaintop. Well, I don't know if that's possible, but I know that as I mitigate the amount of time that I listen to the news media or anything, that's a script. And that, do I want to be empowered? You know, as it says in the beginning, there must be a better way. I mean, I want an alternative, and so I have a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're kind of stating what is, if you think about it for a moment, is a very clear picture. The news media that we've created here in this illusion that we have is a story of guilt projection.
Yes,
that's pretty much all it is. You don't turn the news on and watch stories of love and flowers and hippies dancing around, you know.
No, although I was one.
Yeah, you turn the news on and you get the stories of the murders and the guilt and the war and the, you know, and what are all those stories? Separation, separation. Here's another story, separation. Here's another story, separation. Here's another one.
Let's get those guys.
That's, you know.
But it's
that's
almost like that box of candy. Oh, I know I shouldn't, but I love it so much.
Right,
I ate the whole box.
Right, exactly.
Which
But
is,
that's what that is. I
Yeah.
mean, there I am attached to the
So-
news.
Right.
So
I thought, why
we
am I
got
doing this?
we got this one down here, right? Pleasure.
Yeah,
Right.
well, I know better, but it's just so good.
One more
Yeah.
chunk of chocolate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just one more piece.
And it's right in chapter 19. The obstacles to peace, one of them is the attraction of guilt.
Yeah.
I think it might be the second one. It might be the first. Anyway, it's one of the obstacles to peace that we are actually attracted to this thought system. If we were not
Yeah.
attracted to it, we would instantly and easily choose love without
Yeah.
exception,
Yeah.
and we'd be home.
Yeah.
It'd all be over. But we are attracted to this. And it's a sick addiction that we're learning. And just like any addict, we have to, confront our addiction. We have to come to terms with it, and then we have to practice letting go of it. Jesus says miracles are habits. So thinking with the right mind is a habit. This is our good habit. Ego is our bad habit.
How do you get the good habit?
How do we get the good habit?
Good habit, practice.
Yeah, practice. Exactly.
So we have to look at the Kavanaugh hearings from a perspective of love.
If you want to be at peace, yes. This is the choice that you're making. You don't have to do anything. I mean, you could rage all day. You could scream at your TV and throw it out the window. I mean, people do these kinds of things.
Through
But-
your course habit.
Or the McDonald's situation, Van Dyke, that has to be approached from.
You can see the Christ in everyone regardless of what's happening on the level of form. And this is not necessarily easy, but it is achievable. Right? And this is why Jesus is the example of this, that even when they were attacking his body, even when they were killing his body, he had nothing but love in his heart. Now that seems pretty extreme, and we're not asked to do that, right? He says,
But in the temple, he was.
well, that's a story about Jesus that I don't necessarily think is true. I mean, there are a number of things in the Bible that he corrects in here. He says, the Bible had a wrong take on this. The Bible had they kind of got me wrong on this. He doesn't really mention the temple at all in the course, but it doesn't fit the story of Jesus that makes sense to me. So others might choose to believe it. That's fine. But in my mind, the messenger of love that he clearly
could
is.
he have been in the temple and still be coming from a place of love or peace?
So this is the challenge, right? A loving mind, a truly loving mind, will express only loving words and actions.
Well,
But that doesn't mean-
comes down to the idea of when you confront an alcoholic, are you coming from a place of love and peace when what do you call it when they
Intervention.
They have a certain name when
Intervention?
Intervention or
Yeah.
when
You can be, right? I mean, you can be clear and loving and kind even when you are speaking out against something, right? So it's really the essence of the nature of kind of whose hand are you holding while you're taking an action. You can take an action that's very firm and someone might be interpreting as an
tough
attack.
love.
Right, yeah. But if you're coming from a place of kindness, there's absolutely no judgment in what you're saying or doing. You can set boundaries around yourself that might say, until you are able to treat me with respect, I have to cut off connection with you. You can do that from a place of love. You're not blaming the other person. You're not making them guilty or bad. You're coming from that place of peace within you. So the course is never about a prescription about behavior. It's never about what you do. It's only ever about who are you choosing to be with as you move through the world. So, yeah, and it brings up some tricky kind of concepts, right? If no action is inherently bad, does that mean you could, for example, be violent? I don't think you could be really violent, but there can be loving things. Like I think that some assisted suicide is very a loving thing to do because you're helping someone out of suffering. Now, a lot of people don't see it that way. They think that that's an attack, that it's killing. But so again, some of these things, if we look at it through a loving perspective, it's not always totally crystal clear in this world about behaviors. But we can come from a loving place, and when we do that, all of what we do flows from that love within. There's a famous mystic who quoted a Christian mystic, I think, and they said, love and do what you will. So that first word is really the key. When you are in a place of love, you will simply do what is loving. And what you do will always come from that place. Yeah.
So even the minister, the Afro-American minister, said he had love and compassion for the family of this police officer.
Yeah, so I don't know the whole story, but yeah,
Well,
you
the
can
minister
come from
that
place.
he was sort of trying to get this thing going, and it wasn't so much that we need to be angry at this police officer, because he looked at the family of this police officer, and because at times it's hard for me to get to some kind of oasis of compassion. But if I can come from a position of love, it gets a little easier every time.
Yeah.
And as Charlie was saying, it's this critical voice, well, you're not loving all the time. Well, it's, I'm doing the best I can. It's progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's great.
I was just, it's so funny the way this works. I happen to have a bookmark here, but so I just read from a section I told you a few minutes ago called The Healed Relationship. So the concept in this section is that
what page is this?
this is again on chapter 17, page 362. So the healed relationship starts out, this is the title, and then it starts out, the holy relationship is the expression of the holy instant in living in this world. The holy instant is the moment I recognize my brother in oneness. That is the holy instant. I recognize my brother in love, not in separation, right? And so the practice for me is to catch myself not doing that and see him as that. So when I get into stories about, this body and that body and that body, what I'm seeing is my brother in separation. What I want to do is see my brother in oneness and experience that holy relationship instead of the one that I've got going of two bodies, right? So the holy relationship is simply this: Father and Son. That is the holy relationship. And we are all in that relationship. We are only the Son of God. That's who we are. I'm not Charlie, and you're not Frank, and you're not Kathy. In truth, we are spirit. We are the Son of God. We are not these bodies. So the going to the place of not being at peace is just affirmation for me, that I'm buying into this wrong-minded thinking, that I'm thinking with the ego, that I'm choosing a little story rather than this grand story, right? And so the practice, again, is to feel this kind of upset, feel this disassociation, feel this disconnect, right? Feel this separation. And in that feeling, I want to recognize I've chosen the ego. And that's really, we keep bringing it back. As Barret started out today, we keep talking about the same thing because it's the simplicity of this is so basic, right? I want to recognize that I'm choosing the ego. I'm the observer, right? This is a wonderful word here. I'm the observer of how I'm thinking. That's what I want to observe, how I'm thinking. And when I find myself thinking with the ego, I want to simply go to my teacher, the other teacher, Holy Spirit. Jesus tells us early on, you've been badly taught. You've been badly taught. Fire this dude, fire this teacher and come into my course, right? Come into the course here, right? But we don't take the final exam the first day of the class. There's a lot of work that goes into this. And why is it a lot of work? Because we are so fearful of leaving this. We are so locked into these stories. We're so afraid, right, that we're going to screw this thing up. It's screwed up as it is. We're afraid of letting go of it because it's my story. It's my story. This is who Charlie is. This is what he's got going. And this is who's guilty in his life, and this is how I see things, right? No, it's not. That's not the truth. None of those stories that I tell myself are the truth. None of the stories I witness are the truth, right? They're all coming from down here. They're all
Charlie, I
stories
had
of
a
lies.
memoir on all this. What am I to do with the memoir?
Yeah, we do. We have these incredible stories, don't we?
Right,
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, these incredible stories of Charlie the Body. Charlie the Body did this. Charlie the Body did that. Right. Yeah.
Or why didn't you?
Yeah. Or why? Yeah. Yeah. Or you're guilty for not doing that.
Right.
That's right.
So.
It's a story called My Life. Subtitle: Here's all the people that wronged me.
Yeah.
And when are they gonna pay?
And how they.
Right.
All right.
Well, you get to the past it, or you're, okay, great.
I've got another story here too. Oh wait, before that, yeah.
People in the Me Too movement are, they have to change their perspective on the thing, I guess, or look at it differently.
No one has to do anything.
Because
Right.
some of these women are pretty, they're pissed off, is
Yeah.
to lose it.
So the Course says anger is never justified, but it never says that you shouldn't feel angry. Right? It's just saying when you feel your anger, do your best not to justify it. So it's important, actually, as we do our healing, that we allow our emotions. One of the things that can happen with the Course is we can try to short circuit the process of healing by saying none of this is real. I shouldn't feel bad. I shouldn't feel sad. I shouldn't feel angry. I shouldn't feel, fill in the blank, whatever our feeling is. And we deny our feelings with the idea that this world is an illusion. That's not helpful. It's much more helpful to let the feelings come up. And then as the feelings are coming up and being felt, then you switch into the memory. Then you hand them over to Jesus. Then you ask for his help. So the Course is not about judging someone else's anger, for example. And it's not about saying that their emotion or expression is wrong. Obviously, they're not in peace in that moment. We can see that, right? If someone in the midst of anger is not at peace, these two states are mutually exclusive. But we can even be loving and kind to people while they're in a place of anger. We can be loving and kind to people while they're in a place of hatred, while they're in a place of violence. Again, this is taking it all the way, right? This is that Jesus level. Or we can see that even in their insanity, however it's playing itself out, that what they're really doing is they're asking us for love. That everyone all the time is asking us for love. That if they're expressing love, the appropriate response is love. If they're expressing hurt, what they're really doing is they're asking us for love. And it's up to us if we're actually hearing that call, right? The ego doesn't hear that call. The ego can't hear that call. The ego only sees all of this as a call for a defense, to armor up, to attack back, right? This is the ego script. But what we're learning is that we can let that go. We can let that go and we can come into the gentleness. So, I'm all for people expressing their truth. Sometimes it's an angry truth. It might not be this truth, right? It's a truth within the world. It's a truth of their experience here. But generally, that's a part of the healing journey, is to acknowledge what we feel within. And sometimes speaking truth to power in this world is helpful. Sometimes it starts to change things. And a lot of times those actions, they're not from a very peaceful place. So is that the truth? No, it's not the truth. Nothing here in the world is the truth. But it can be a part of the healing to come into the truth, in my viewpoint. So are people expressing anger in that state of truth or peace? No. Because again, those are two different thought systems. So one of the definitions of forgiveness is to witness the ego without judging it. And this is part of our work, both in ourselves and in the people around us, the people we see on TV, the people in our lives, to hold them in kindness, even if they're angry, even if they're hurt, even if they're being cruel. It doesn't mean we need to put up with abuse, right? We can still set appropriate boundaries or walk out of the room, but we can do all that from a place of gentleness. So, yeah. And again, it comes back to what Charlie said. If we're watching someone express anger on these hearings or whatever, what is happening in us? right? If all of a sudden we're not at peace watching someone share their story, then the work becomes ours, right? Because it's always possible for us to have a sense of peace. So I did want to share again another story that I found online. So this gentleman.
Is it the same grandma?
No, this is a different person. So yeah, she had quite a doozy of a story. That was a good one.
She's long gone.
That's right. She's through the next 5 intersections already. Did you hear all the honking out there? This gentleman writes, after the funeral for a close elder relative, my wife and children stayed home while I had to leave town for 3 days. As I was driving to the airport, I actually started to get really depressed. And getting onto the plane, I was so depressed, I said a prayer, Lord, I'm so down, you've got to send me someone to inspire me or give me encouragement. Well, I kid you not, just 30 seconds after saying that prayer, I get onto the plane and get to my seat. Right next to me is sitting a priest. I could tell he was wearing one of those white collars. I don't know about you folks, but man, I got goosebumps. They just went up and down my arms. I knew I was in the presence of a miraculous event. And I knew he was going to have some words of wisdom for me. So I sat down, I looked him right in the eye, and I said, I can't tell you how glad I am to see you. He looked right back at me, and he said, sorry, no speak English. So
it's great.
That's good, Barret.
did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to interject one last thing. We had a great discussion here the other day on, there's a section called the little hindrance. And we were talking about it on Thursday here. And the little hindrance, Jesus is pointing out, the little hindrance is simply this. The little hindrance is our belief in this. And if you think of the words here, he's saying it's a little hindrance. This is nothing. It doesn't mean a thing. It's only so real and so important because we make it so. But in the eyes of the Holy Spirit, the vision of the Holy Spirit, the recognition in heaven, it's nothing but a little hindrance. It's just a thought. That's all the separation is. It's just a thought that I'm separate from my Father. It's just a thought that my brother and I are separate. You know, one just leads into the other. You know, it's just a thought that that driver did something wrong. It's just a thought that my wife's wrong about this discussion. It's just a thought. That's all it is. It's this little tiny hindrance. None of it is true. The truth is I'm one. You know, I'm in this place of joy and I'm in this place of love. And we're talking about how we get to this place of where the rubber meets the road. How do we live this in our life, right? As we've been touching on somewhat today, when I am not at peace, then guess what? You know, I'm buying into the hindrance. That's all it is. I'm buying into a belief system that says I'm separate from my Father. I loved it. You know, a couple of years back, we were here one Saturday and Barret pointed to this little arrow and he said, it's a belief system. You know, and it was the first time I really heard that after all the reading I was doing, right? All the studying in the course. It's a belief system. It's just the way I think, you know? It's just the Son of God thinking that he's separate from his Father. And Jesus is telling it, it's just a little hindrance, you know? And rather than choose the grandeur of this, we continue to choose the hindrance. We continue to choose the block in our recognition. We can continue to choose, you know, all of these great words down here, you know, pain, sickness, specialness, sin, guilt, fear, scarcity, rather than these ideas, you know, real enough, holy instant, holy relation, salvation, healing, true perception, vision, you know, and it's just a little thought is all it is. It's just a little hindrance. So I just wanted to bring out, as you were speaking, you know, I was just thinking about our conversation here Thursday. It was that's such a beautiful section. It's a section where Jesus talks about the tiny man idea, being a tiny tick of time, you know, that happened, that actually never happened. It was a tiny tick of time in eternity, which was never even noticed, you know, and we built this entire world on it, you know, this entire way we see, the entire way everything goes on in our lives is built on this
little hindrance, this little thought that said, what if I do this myself? The Son of God said, what if I do this myself? I don't need my Father. I'm separate from him.
So
questions? Or?
well, yeah, we've been having a really nice conversation
Well, I
already,
think-
but
yeah.
we always like to make sure we really open it up. And if there's any more sharings, any other questions, or if you just want to go deeper on anything we've been talking about, yeah, the floor is open. Yeah.
Barret, whenever I get depressed, and I mentioned this on Thursday, I read the epilogue.
Mm.
And it just,
Mm.
especially if I've had a day where things just don't seem to be going my way,
Mm-hmm.
and the epilogue just,
Yeah.
I find it's warm and fuzzy for me, and yeah.
Yeah, there are so many really sweet parts of the course, and I'm going to share one in a little bit. Maybe it's time to share it now, actually. Charlie and I did a talk about the gifts of God. I think it was last year around this time. So if you're not familiar, the gifts of God is the collection of Helen Schuckman's poetry, but it also has a very sweet prose. It's really a continuation of the course. It's like another 10 or 15 pages of the course that are not in the course. I've got it here on my phone. And there's some of these really sweet places in here too. And the end of this prose poem it's just an upwelling of love and joy, in my opinion, and very reassuring. So I'm going to read a bit of it here. The night is dark, but it will have an end. Be comforted with this. No one I send to help you reach the goal will fail to stand beside you till your kingdom is secure. The promises of God are given you. What could be surer? There is help indeed for one so near to heaven. There is change in everything but this. Whom he has called and who has answered him, as you have done, can rest in peace upon his loving arm, and trust his gratitude and thankful heart to beat for yours when yours appears to fail. Do not imagine he will leave his child who heard his voice and listened to his word. Remember this, the thanks of God are yours and will not leave you comfortless for long. You still are needed in the world to hear his voice and share his messages of love with those who call in sorrow. Could it be that you will fail to find him when his need for you becomes as great as yours for him? You need not fear that you will suffer loss, nor that he will abandon you, who gave his comfort to his Son. Receive the gift you gave to God, and he would give to you. And it just goes on and on for a while longer, but I wanted to share part of it because it's just so sweet. And, in a way, even though Jesus talks so much about the ego, the Course is a massive love song to us. It's really a sweet song that he's singing to help us remember our truth. All of its words, when you start to see it like this, there's just like, I love you, I love you, I love you. It's like imbued through the whole message of the Course. And he knows that we're still afraid of that love. He knows that we're still pushing against it. But his arms are always open. This idea of being embraced by Jesus, embraced by God. The hug, the embrace is always there for us. It's only ever us sometimes who turns away. And we're just learning that. And we're starting to turn back. We're starting to turn back again and again. Yeah.
I have a question to go back to you and your trip. Are there steps that you went through with your fear of Germany? And could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so step one, noticing it, right? Step two was recalling the projection, right? So that was, I thought I was feeling afraid because of this trip to Germany that I'm leaving on Wednesday, actually. So yeah, it's very exciting. But then realizing that wasn't the deeper source of the fear.
So you recognized or you were aware there's something under that fear
Mhm.
that was
Mhm.
deeper.
Now, again, at this
Mm.
point, you can go right to the realization. It all comes back to the tiny mat idea, separation from God. But it can sometimes be helpful to kind of explore, just like, well, what in this life is this about? Or again, because I do past lives, I sometimes look at that level. Did I have a lifetime where I died in Germany? Or, those sorts of questions I sort of ask. But you don't necessarily need to look, you use whatever you have available to you to ask that question. Where's this coming from? And sometimes another story will show up. And then it's sort of like, oh, phase 2, I do forgiveness on this next story because I feel the feelings associated with it. And then I remember it's not really this story that's the cause of my upset either. And eventually, sometimes it's a few layers of this, but we always come back to the separation from God as the core. That's always the deepest layer. That's always the root of all of it. And then when I get to that point, I say to myself, but the separation from God isn't real. So the root is not true. So I don't really need to suffer from it. Now, at times that will automatically melt or diminish the pain or fear I'm feeling. Other times it might not seem to have a whole lot of outward effect, but that's why we just keep doing it. So there are times where we do really feel a really quick sense of peace as we go through the process, and other times where it seems to need more of a cumulative effect. And then the last step is just to ask for that help from Jesus or Holy Spirit. Say, you can look at this with loving eyes. Show me how to do that. That there's a way here, because it's always possible. And that's why the red flag is really our lack of peace, as we talked about before. As we go through our days, as we go through all of our situations. Anytime we're not at peace, then we know that we can go through this process of forgiveness. We can apply these principles to what's going on. And again, as we keep practicing, that will lead us back to peace. Because peace is our
I
truth.
forgot the word I was thinking of. It was intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can have an intervention coming from a place of peace
Okay.
rather than anger.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So to share a story kind of in these
That's
lines,
the way they work best.
a friend of mine was at a party, and there was people that were starting to fight. And he very quickly and naturally wrestled one of the people to the ground and sat on him. But he wasn't judging him. He wasn't attacking him. He wasn't hurting him. Maybe it hurt a little, to be sat on. But his whole purpose was to help. And it wasn't about an attack. So he was able to take action. He was able to help prevent what could have been further violence. But he did so non-judgmentally. And this is kind of the attitude that we can have. We don't need to wrestle people to the ground necessarily, but in whatever way that shows up for us, we can adopt that attitude. So yeah, definitely, you could do an intervention with someone who's having a problem with addiction of some sort.
Actually, I have a story about that. There was a dear friend of mine, goes back to high school, and he was living in Seattle. And at 58 years old, he got involved with crack cocaine. Now, how bizarre is that to begin with? And his life really hit the skids quickly. And his family finally caught on, because he wasn't really with them. They were all back here. They finally caught on, and I was catching on, and a couple other people were catching on. So we went to Seattle, and we did an intervention. The day before the intervention, we met with the interventionist, because we'd hired a professional interventionist to do this with us. And I had lived in Seattle back 30 years ago with my friend. And we went into this meeting with the interventionist, and all these old friends from my Seattle days showed up. And it was an absolutely joyous love fest surrounding this guy in this predicament. He wasn't there, right, that first day. We were in the counselor's office. But to this day, I can't tell you many more experiences I've had in this lifetime, in this bodysuit, that was more love-filled than that meeting in that place that afternoon. There was so much love for this guy that was suffering. It was unbelievable.
How did he respond?
We got up the next morning, I went and stayed at his house that night. Gave him some bullshit story of why I was in Seattle. I can't even tell you what it was, And he was such a mess from the drugs. He didn't know what was going on. But I got up really early in the morning and I unlocked the door and opened the door and everybody had showed up, right? They all came into the living room and I went in and I woke him up and I said, come into the living room. And he got up and he stumbled in there and there was this 20 people sitting in this tiny little living room. And one after another, we professed our love for him. Mm-hmm. It was unbelievable. It was so emotional. All of us were just in tears, expressing our love for this guy. And how he reacted was he got up, he went in, got dressed, he got a little bag, threw his shaving kit or something in there, got in a car and went to treatment. Mm-hmm. So, but it was one of the most love-filled expressions, in this illusion that I've ever seen. It was so beautiful. Mm-hmm. So, this is the kind of thing that we can experience in this life, this recognizing our brother in this love, right? And it's such a beautiful thing. So where the rubber meets the road for us in this, is we're meant to be joyous, We're meant to be living a life in joy. And when I've chosen not to, I can see that. I can see how I've made the choice and I can choose differently, So I say all the time, it can be in the next breath, right? This recognition that I've chosen this, in the next breath, I can choose differently, right? I can choose to ask Holy Spirit for that help. And I can express my love and my gratitude to my Father, right? For that clarity, just that moment of clarity, that's all it needed. That moment of willingness, that moment of understanding, the oneness is all there really is, not this story of separation. So.
Wow.
Anything
Any
else
other questions
coming up?
Yeah.
Well, I have the same trip. I'm leaving Thursday. You're leaving Wednesday.
Oh, nice.
And I'm
You going to Hamburg?
No, going to France. But the fact of having to change and get on a train and change trains, I've been walking around for weeks with just a knot in my stomach, and I keep trying to say to myself, it's going to work out. You've done this before. It's all going to work out. And I haven't quite gotten there. My rubber is bouncing on the road.
So again, as you're sharing, thank you for naming that, right? This is what it seems to be about, right? It seems to be about transferring from a plane to a train and all the things that, I don't know, your ego's spinning. What if? But on a deeper level, right? This is about you fearing that you're not going to make it home to God. Right? That your trip home here is going to get stopped somewhere along the way, and you're not going to make it. Right? This is our fear, right? You can see it in the story of the prodigal son, right? The prodigal son fears when he returns back to his father that he's going to be judged. He says, "Oh, well, I'll just be a servant. Don't worry about it." But what happens instead? He's met with love. He's met with open arms. They throw a party. It's a good time. And so there's these two layers here for you. Yeah. And you don't really have to fear, right? Because not only are we inevitably going to wake up to our experience of oneness in God, in truth, we're already there. In truth, we're already home.
Barret, can I just read the first paragraph on the epilogue?
Please.
Because it's about metaphors, a journey. And so it goes, and it's forget not, once this journey is begun, the end is certain. Doubt along the way will come and go to come again. Yet is the ending sure. No one can fail to do what God appointed him to do. When you forget, remember that you walk with him, with his word upon your heart. Who could despair when hope like this is his? Illusions of despair may seem to come, but learn how not to be deceived by them. Behind each one there is a reality, and there is God. Why would you wait for this and trade it for illusions when his love is but an instant further on the road where all illusions end? The end is sure and guaranteed by God, who stands before a lifeless image when a step away of the Holy of Holies, open up an ancient door that leads beyond the world.
Mm.
It's and I you know, there can be almost every day I'll glance at this.
Mm.
You know, because when I'm listening to that voice or the ego, and I'm at despair, I read this and it just picks my spirits up.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So it kind of fits. I just had a couple things I was going to mention here, and then we'll probably wrap up. But I opened up to lesson 41. God goes with me wherever I go.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a good one for you to take with you.
Mm-hmm.
And just remember, maybe when you're getting off the train and trying to figure out where to go with the next one, okay, I'm here with God. God's here with me. There's nothing to fear. And actually, I think maybe that was all I needed to share on that one. And then I wanted to read a bit from the section, What is Creation, in the workbook. So I'll read a little bit of the beginning here, and maybe, Creation is the sum of all God's thoughts, in number infinite, and everywhere without all limit. Only love creates, and only like itself. There was no time when all that it created was not there, nor will there be a time when anything that it created suffers any loss. Forever and forever are God's thoughts, exactly as they were and as they are, unchanged through time and after time is done. And then skipping ahead, we are creation, we the sons of God. We seem to be discreet and unaware of our eternal unity with Him. Yet back of all our doubts, past all our fears, there still is certainty. For love remains with all its thoughts, its sureness being theirs. God's memory is in our holy minds, which know their oneness and their unity with their Creator. Let our function be only to let this memory return, only to let God's will be done on earth, only to be restored to sanity, and to be but as God created us. Our Father calls to us. We hear His voice, and we forgive creation in the name of its Creator, holiness itself, whose holiness His own creation shares, whose holiness is still a part of us. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been a real joy to share with you guys.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Very much.
We have another great Course in Miracles event right here tomorrow.
Tomorrow on this stage.
1 to 5 p.m. There's going to be the 2 of us plus 4 other course teachers.
Is there a lunch provided?
There will be some food, actually, some snacks. Yeah, so it'd be great to have you here if that speaks to you.
Yeah, I look forward to that tomorrow.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah.
Barret,